First story is censored news. People bleeding internally, millions poisoned, said EPA whistleblower. This is last name Kaufman, EPA whistleblower of Democracy Now! Oh, Mark Kaufman. He says, we have dolphins that are hemorrhaging. People who work near it are hemorrhaging internally. This is the oil spill. And that's what the dispersants are supposed to do. In its report, EPA whistleblower accuses agency of covering up effects of dispersant in BP oil spill cleanup. Democracy Now! States that, quote, many lawmakers and advocacy groups say the Obama administration is not being candid about the lethal effects of the dispersants. So Amy Goodman interviewed Hugh Kaufman, a senior policy analyst at the EPA's Office of Solid Waste and Emergency Response, a leading critic of the decision to use Corexit 9500, this is the main dispersant they're using, who disclosed how the officials are lying about many things related to the catastrophe poisoning millions of people. Now this is, I'm picking these stories on purpose, where we've got senior policy analysts at EPA. We've got people that have a lot of credentials are coming forward saying this. It's not just some one person putting up a story regarding the Gulf. These are actually people that have a lot more experience with this than I do. And there's a real audio link I give you here where you can click and listen to this interview with this EPA whistleblower. The transcript includes Kaufman saying, quote, and I think the media now has to follow the money, just as they did in Watergate, and tell the American people who's getting money for poisoning the millions of people in the Gulf. While concerns over the impact of chemical dispersants continue to grow, Gulf residents are outraged by a recent announcement that the $20 billion government-administered claim fund will subtract money the cleanup workers earn by working for the cleanup effort from any future claims. So if they're working for the BP cleanup now, they're working, let's say, a 9-to-5 job, any amount of money that they get paid is going to be subtracted from any future claims. That is just insanity. But this is what's happening. BP is trying to weasel out any possible way they can pay for anything, is what it boils down to, because they're evil. Going further, it says the Vessels of Opportunity program has employed hundreds of Gulf Coast out-of-work people because of the spill, which Kaufman says is viewed as just another way to limit the number of lawsuits against BP. Well, why would she say that? Well, because if you're working for them, you're going to have a lot less likelihood of wanting to sue your boss if he's the one paying the paychecks. That's why she said that. And the government, both the EPA and NOAA, etc., have been sock puppets. I love that phrase, sock puppets. Anyway, have been sock puppets for BP in the cover-up. Kaufman concurs with an MSNBC report last week that, quote, the sole purpose of the Gulf for the dispersants. Now, this is what this EPA insider says. The sole purpose in the Gulf for the dispersants is to keep a cover-up going for BP to try to hide the volume of oil that has been released and save them hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in fines. Not to protect the public health or environment. It's quite the opposite. Well, why would she say that? Because if you are dispersing the dispersants at the, let's say, wherever it's leaking, or spraying it over the ocean, what are the dispersants doing? They're breaking up the oil into microfine particles and they're sinking the oil. Oil will normally float to the top. Okay? Like they say, oil and water don't mix. Well, if you put oil and water, it generally floats to the top. Well, we're not seeing that because they're spraying these millions of gallons of this toxic dispersant on the oil. It's breaking it up and it's sinking the oil. And so what's happening is kind of like out of sight, out of mind. You're not seeing near as much of what's actually in the water. There's literal plumes down there that are miles and miles and miles long. They could be 3,000 feet down. You don't even know they exist. But they're creating gigantic dead zones in the ocean. So this is exactly why, one of the reasons why they're using the dispersants. It's also to kill us, as we're going to see, because they gotta fulfill that. The first commandment of the New World Order, the Georgia Guidestone, some way to reduce world population to 500 million. And they got to do it some way, right? So that's another thing they're doing. He says to follow the money. That leads to individuals in the Obama administration, naming Mr. Geithner, Mr. Summers, with close ties to Larry Fink, who owns BlackRock, that owns most of the BP shares. He commented that children are being poisoned. He said, quote, "You know, when you're on the sand with your children and they dig down and there's a little bit of water, well, now they've documented there was over 200 parts per million of oil waste in the water. But it's not noticeable to the human eye." Well, how could that be? Because they're using so much dispersants, it's breaking it up into such microfine particles, you don't even know it's in there. You can look at it and you can't even tell. It's subtle. It's just like Satan. He's the most subtle beast of the field. On top of that, the contamination in just one of the samples was so high. Now, I read this the other night, and I didn't report on it right away because I wasn't 100% sure, but now I'm getting a lot of confirmation. The contamination in one of those samples was so high that when they put solvent in it, as a first step in identifying how much oil is in the water, the thing blew up. The actual sample blew up when they put the solvent in. The water's that toxic in some of these places in the Gulf right now. It's got that much oil in it. And I give you a link to that story where this scientist did the study and the actual sample blew up. Okay, so, and then he says, just as he said, probably because there was too much Corexit in that particular sample. When Goodman asked Kaufman to comment on the similarities between Ground Zero and the Gulf catastrophe and what happened at Ground Zero at 9/11, he explained that he did the Ombudsman investigation on Ground Zero, where the EPA made false statements about the safety of the air, which has since proven to be totally false. So they're just, they're totally in league with the government. They are the government, and they're just working hand in hand in this gigantic cover-up.